The alarm screamed through the corridors of the USS Defiance like a wounded animal crying for help, and Kate Morrison nearly dropped her coffee mug as the red warning lights began flashing across every surface of the ship she had been sitting in. The mess hall reading reports about engine maintenance when the emergency signal cut through the peaceful morning routine, like a knife through paper, and suddenly everyone was moving with purpose and fear in their eyes. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morrison pushed herself up from the metal table and felt her heart start beating faster as she heard Captain Frank Rodriguez's voice boom over the ship's communication system, calling all senior officers to the bridge immediately. Kate ran through the narrow hallways of the rescue vessel, while crew members pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass, and she could hear the steady thrum of the ship's engines growing louder as they increased power. When she reached the bridge, she found Captain Rodriguez standing over the main communication console with his face pale and drawn, while Lieutenant Ben Clark worked frantically at the navigation station and sweat beaded on his forehead. The distress signal crackled through the speakers, again, and Kate could hear the desperation in the voice of whoever was sending it from somewhere deep in space where no help should be able to reach them. Captain Rodriguez looked up at Kate, and his weathered face showed the strain of command as he spoke in a voice that barely controlled his anger at the situation they now faced. The cargo freighter New Haven had suffered what their captain described as catastrophic engine failure while transporting supplies to the outer colonies, and they were stranded near the asteroid belt of Kepler 442, with 37 souls aboard. Kate felt her stomach drop as she realized what this meant, because the asteroid belt was known to be dangerous territory where alien raiders had been spotted in recent months and no rescue ship had ever successfully operated there. Lieutenant Ben Clark turned from his console and shook his head while his hands trembled slightly as he delivered the news that made everyone on the bridge go silent. The New Haven was drifting without power and their life support systems were failing, which meant they had perhaps 6 hours before the crew would start dying. From lack of oxygen, Kate stepped forward and studied the star charts that Clark had brought up on the main screen while she calculated distances and travel times in her head. The rescue would require someone to pilot a small, fast ship through the asteroid field while carrying emergency life support equipment, and that someone would have to make multiple trips to save all 37 people. Captain Rodriguez ran his hand through his gray hair, and Kate could see him weighing the risks against the certain death that awaited the crew of the New Haven if they did nothing. The problem was that intelligence reports had confirmed alien raider activity in that exact sector, and any rescue ship would be flying into what amounted to a war zone. Kate knew that her ship, the Valkyrie 1, was the only vessel aboard the USS Defiance that could make the journey quickly enough to matter, and she also knew that she was the best pilot they had. She had spent years training for exactly this kind of mission where speed and skill would mean the difference between life and death for dozens of people. Captain Rodriguez looked directly at Kate and she could see the question in his eyes before he even spoke it aloud. The mission would be dangerous beyond anything they had attempted before, and the chances of success were not good, but Kate felt something inside her chest that she recognized as the same feeling she got whenever people needed help. She thought about the 37 crew members floating helpless in space, while their air slowly ran out, and she knew there was really no choice to be made. Kate straightened her shoulders and looked Captain Rodriguez in the eye while she spoke the words that would send her into the most dangerous mission of her career. She volunteered for the solo rescue mission and felt a cold determination settle over her like armor as she prepared to face whatever waited in the darkness. Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly, and Kate could see relief mixed with worry in his expression as he gave her permission to proceed with the rescue attempt. Lieutenant Ben Clark pulled up detailed charts of the asteroid field and began calculating the safest route through the floating rocks, while Kate mentally prepared herself for what lay ahead. The Valkyrie 1 was a fighter-rescue hybrid that had been designed specifically for missions like this one, where speed mattered more than heavy weapons or thick armor. Kate had flown the ship for 3 years and knew every system and control, as well as she knew her own heartbeat, but she had never taken it into combat against alien raiders. She gathered her flight gear and headed for the hangar bay, while crew members wished her luck and tried not to look like they were saying goodbye forever. As she walked through the ship, Kate thought about her call sign and wondered if anyone aboard the USS Defiance knew the real story behind the name Deadweight. The accident that had earned her that call sign had happened during a training exercise years ago when she was forced to make an impossible choice between saving one person or saving many. Her wingman had died that day, and Kate had carried the blame and the guilt even after the investigation cleared her of any wrongdoing. The other pilots had started calling her deadweight because they thought she had frozen under pressure and failed to act when it mattered most. But Kate knew the truth was different, and she had learned to live with the weight of making hard choices, even when those choices meant someone had to die. Now, she was about to face another situation where her decisions would determine who lived and who died, and she felt the familiar cold settle in her stomach. The hangar bay was buzzing with activity as the ground crew prepared the Valkyrie 1 for launch and loaded it with emergency life support pods and medical supplies. Kate ran through her pre-flight checklist while trying not to think about the alien raiders that might be waiting for her in the asteroid field. She climbed into the cockpit and sealed her helmet while the hangar bay doors began opening to reveal the star-filled void of space. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through her headset one last time before launch, and Kate could hear the worry in his tone as he wished her safe flying. The Valkyrie 1 shot out of the hangar bay like a bullet, and Kate felt the familiar rush of acceleration as she pointed her ship toward the asteroid belt and the stranded crew of the New Haven. Behind her, the USS Defiance grew smaller until it was just another point of light in the darkness, and ahead of her lay a journey through some of the most dangerous space in the known galaxy. Kate checked her navigation computer and saw that she had approximately 4 hours to reach the New Haven and begin evacuating its crew before their life support failed completely. She pushed the Valkyrie 1 to maximum speed and watched the stars blur past while she tried not to think about what might be waiting for her at the end of this flight. Kate pushed the Valkyrie 1 through the black emptiness of space while her instruments showed the distance to the New Haven, slowly decreasing with each passing minute. The stars around her looked cold and distant like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Her ship carried emergency life support pods that could keep people alive for several hours, and medical supplies that might save lives if she could reach the stranded crew in time. The navigation computer showed her the safest route through the asteroid belt, but Kate knew that safe was a relative term when alien raiders might be lurking behind any of the floating rocks. She had been flying for 2 hours when her long-range sensors picked up something that made her blood turn cold in her veins. 3 alien raider ships were moving through the asteroid field on a course that would bring them to the New Haven in approximately 1 hour. Kate felt her heart start pounding as she realized she was now racing, not just against time, but against an enemy that would show no mercy to the helpless crew of the cargo freighter. She increased power to her engines and felt the Valkyrie 1 respond with a surge of speed that pressed her back into her pilot seat. The alien ships were still too far away for her to get detailed readings, but she knew from intelligence reports that raider vessels were fast and heavily armed. Kate tried to contact the New Haven on the emergency frequency, but the signal was weak and filled with static that made it hard to understand the responses. During the flight, she began receiving coded transmissions from Earth and was surprised to recognize the call sign of Major Alex Parker, who commanded an F-22 squadron. Parker was monitoring deep space communications from his base on Earth, and Kate wondered why an atmospheric fighter pilot would be watching her mission. The transmissions were carefully coded to avoid detection by alien interceptors, but Kate could tell that Parker was tracking her progress through the asteroid field. She had heard of Alex Parker before because his squadron had a reputation for pushing the boundaries of what F-22 fighters could accomplish. The F-22 pilots had been ordered to maintain complete radio silence due to ongoing tensions with hostile alien factions, but Parker seemed to be bending those rules. Kate wondered if Parker knew something about her mission that she had not been told, and she felt a growing sense that this rescue was more important than it appeared. Her sensors showed the asteroid field growing larger ahead of her, and she could see the massive rocks tumbling slowly through space like the debris from some ancient battle. The rocks were the remnants of a planet that had been destroyed millions of years ago, and they created a maze that was difficult and dangerous to navigate. Kate reduced her speed and began weaving between the asteroids while her navigation computer calculated the safest path through the debris. Some of the rocks were as large as mountains, while others were no bigger than her ship, and all of them posed a threat if she made a mistake. Her instruments detected traces of exotic metals in the asteroids that suggested they might be the remains of an alien civilization that had been destroyed in some long-ago war. Kate tried not to think about what kind of weapon could destroy an entire planet and turn it into a field. A floating rubble. The coded transmissions from Major Parker continued to reach her, and she began to suspect that he recognized her call sign from classified military records. Few people knew the real story behind the name Deadweight, and most of those who did were high-ranking officers with access to sensitive information. Kate wondered if Parker had been there during the investigation that followed the training accident years ago when her wingman died. She remembered sitting in the hearing room while officers questioned her about every decision she had made during those terrible minutes. The accident had happened when her flight encountered an out-of-control civilian transport that was about to collide with a space station. Kate had been forced to choose between saving her wingman and preventing a disaster that would have killed hundreds of innocent people. She had chosen to save the civilians, and her wingman had died when his damaged fighter exploded, and the other pilots had never forgiven her. But the investigation had concluded that she made the only choice possible under the circumstances, and that any other pilot would have done the same thing. Kate pushed those memories away and focused on the mission ahead as her ship moved deeper into the asteroid field. Her sensors showed the alien raider ships getting closer to the New Haven, and she realized she might arrive at almost the same time they did. The thought of facing 3 enemy ships in her lightly armed rescue vessel made her stomach clench with fear, but she knew there was no turning back. Kate checked her weapon systems and confirmed that the Valkyrie 1 carried defensive armaments that might be enough to hold off the raiders. She had never used the ship's weapons in actual combat, but she had trained extensively in ship-to-ship fighting during her years as a pilot. The Valkyrie 1 was designed primarily for rescue operations, which meant it was fast and maneuverable, but not heavily armored. Kate would have to rely on speed and skill to survive if she encountered the alien raiders, and she tried not to think about the odds against her. Her navigation computer indicated that she was now halfway through the asteroid field and making good time toward the stranded freighter. The coded transmissions from Major Parker were becoming more frequent, and she could sense urgency in the carefully disguised messages. Kate began to wonder if Earth Command knew more about the alien raiders than they had told her, and if this rescue mission was actually part of something larger. She thought about the 37 crew members aboard the New Haven, who were counting on her to reach them before their air ran out. Captain Lisa Harper was the commander of the cargo freighter, and Kate had read her service record, which showed a competent officer with 20 years of experience. The crew included engineers and maintenance specialists who were being transported to help establish a new colony on one of the outer worlds. Kate wondered if any of them had families waiting for them to return home, and she felt the weight of their lives pressing down on her. Her instruments showed that she was now only 1 hour away from the New Haven, but the alien raider ships were also closing in. Fast, Kate made the decision to push her engines beyond their recommended limits and felt the Valkyrie 1 leap forward with dangerous speed. She knew that overheating her engines might leave her stranded in space, but reaching the New Haven first was more important than her own safety. The asteroids flashed past her ship like a deadly obstacle course, and Kate relied on her reflexes and training to avoid collision. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced precision while her eyes scanned the sensor displays for any sign of the enemy ships. Kate could feel sweat beading on her forehead inside her helmet as the tension of the flight began to take its toll. The coded transmissions from Major Parker suddenly stopped, and Kate wondered if something had happened to cut off his communications. She tried to contact him directly, but received only static in response, and she felt a chill of worry run down her spine. Kate realized she was now completely alone in the asteroid field, racing against time and enemy ships with the lives of 37 people depending on her. Her sensors finally detected the New Haven floating helplessly among the asteroids, and Kate could see that the cargo ship was badly damaged. The freighter was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, and Kate knew that time was running out faster than anyone had calculated. She also detected the 3 alien raider ships approaching from the opposite side of the asteroid field and realized they would arrive within minutes. Kate felt her heart pounding as she prepared to face the most dangerous situation of her career, with everything depending on the choices she made in the next few minutes. Kate's heart nearly stopped when she saw the New Haven floating among the asteroids like a wounded giant bleeding into space. The massive cargo freighter was venting white clouds of atmosphere from at least 6 different hull breaches, and sparks flew from damaged electrical systems. Emergency lights blinked red and orange across the ship's hull, while pieces of debris drifted away from the worst damage like metal tears. Kate maneuvered the Valkyrie 1 closer and opened emergency communication channels while her sensors analyzed the extent of the damage. Captain Lisa Harper's voice crackled through the static, and Kate could hear the strain and fear in the older woman's tone. Harper explained that their main reactor was overloading and would explode within 3 hours, which would vaporize everything within 10,000 kilometers. The cargo ship had been carrying supplies to establish a new mining colony when their engines suffered catastrophic failure that damaged multiple systems. Kate felt her stomach clench as she realized the situation was even worse than anyone had imagined. The crew of 37 was trapped in different sections of the ship because emergency bulkhead seals had activated to prevent total atmosphere loss. Harper told Kate that most of the crew was gathered in the main cargo bay, which still had life support, but several people were trapped in other areas. Kate could see that rescuing everyone would require multiple trips between the New Haven and safety. While racing against both time and the approaching alien raiders, she activated her ship's external cameras and got her first close look at the damage to the freighter. The hull breaches were massive and jagged like wounds torn by some giant claw, and Kate wondered what could have caused such destruction. Harper explained that the engine explosion had sent shrapnel throughout the ship and damaged the reactor containment system. Kate felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that a reactor explosion would not only kill the crew but also destroy her own ship if she was nearby. She began the first rescue run by extending magnetic grapples to extract emergency life pods that the crew was loading with injured personnel. The life pods were small cylindrical containers that could keep people alive for several hours, but they had to be guided carefully to avoid the floating debris. Kate watched her sensors nervously while she worked because the alien raider ships were getting closer with each passing minute. During the second rescue trip, she discovered something that made the situation even more desperate than before. Officer Danny Wright was trapped in the reactor compartment and was the only person aboard who could prevent the nuclear explosion. Wright was an experienced engineer who had been trying to stabilize the overloading reactor when emergency bulkheads sealed him inside. Kate could hear his voice over the communication system as he described the readings on his instruments with calm professionalism. The reactor was building toward a cascade failure that would happen in less than 3 hours, and Wright was running out of time to prevent it. Kate realized that she was facing an impossible choice between continuing to evacuate crew members and helping Wright stop the explosion. If Wright failed to stabilize the reactor, then everyone would die, including Kate herself and any crew members she had rescued. But if she stopped evacuating people to help Wright, then some of the crew might die from lack of oxygen before she could reach them. Kate felt the familiar cold weight in her stomach that she remembered from the training accident years ago. Once again, she was being forced to choose between saving some people and saving others with no option that would save everyone. Her hands trembled slightly on the controls as she guided another life pod away from the New Haven and toward a safe distance. The life pod contained 3 injured crew members, including a young woman who reminded Kate of her sister back on Earth. Kate tried not to think about the families that would be destroyed if she made the wrong choice in the next few minutes. Wright's voice came through the communication system again, and Kate could hear him working frantically to prevent the reactor from exploding. He explained that the containment field was weakening and that he needed someone to manually reroute power conduits from outside the ship. Kate realized that someone would have to perform dangerous repairs while floating in space near a reactor that might explode at any moment. Her sensors detected movement at the edge of the asteroid field, and Kate felt her blood turn to ice as she saw the alien raider ships. 3 sleek vessels were approaching fast, and Kate could see weapon ports opening along their hulls like hungry mouths. The raiders were still 20 minutes away, but Kate knew that 20 minutes was not enough time to evacuate all the remaining crew members. She would have to make a decision about whether to fight the raiders or continue the rescue operation. Kate looked at her own weapon systems and knew that the Valkyrie 1 was not designed for combat against 3 enemy ships. Her ship carried defensive armaments that might disable 1 raider vessel, But she would be helpless against all three. Wright's voice interrupted her thoughts as he reported that the reactor containment was failing faster than expected. The nuclear explosion would happen in 2 hours instead of 3, which meant Kate had even less time to save everyone. She could see more life pods being prepared aboard the New Haven, but there were still 15 crew members who had not been evacuated. Kate felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders as she realized that every choice she made would determine who lived and who died. Captain Harper's voice came through the communication system, asking for Kate's assessment of the situation. Kate looked at her sensor displays showing the approaching raiders and the failing reactor, and the crew members still trapped aboard the New Haven. She thought about her call sign, Deadweight, and wondered if this was another situation where she would have to carry the burden of an impossible choice. The alien raiders were now visible on her main screen as 3 dark shapes moving between the asteroids like predators stalking their prey. Kate knew that if the raiders reached the New Haven, they would either destroy it completely or capture the crew for purposes she did not want to imagine. She also knew that fighting the raiders would mean abandoning the rescue operation and allowing some crew members to die. Kate felt time slipping away, like sand through her fingers while she tried to find a solution that would save everyone. Wright reported that the reactor containment field was weakening rapidly and that he might have only 1 hour left to prevent the explosion. Kate realized that she was running out of time to make a decision and that hesitation might kill everyone, including herself. She looked at the life pods floating near her ship, containing the crew members she had already rescued, and knew that their lives depended on her. The alien raiders were now close enough for her sensors to detect their weapon signatures, and Kate saw that they carried plasma cannons. Kate made her decision and felt the familiar cold determination settle over her like armor as she prepared for what came next. She would fight the raiders and protect the New Haven even if it meant sacrificing her own ship and her own life. Kate activated her weapon systems and turned the Valkyrie 1 toward the approaching enemy ships, while her heart pounded with fear and resolve. The 3 alien raider ships appeared on Kate's main screen like deadly sharks emerging from dark water, and she felt her mouth go dry with fear. The raiders were sleek black vessels with angular hulls that seemed to absorb light, and their weapon ports glowed with ominous energy. Kate positioned the Valkyrie 1 between the enemy ships and the helpless New Haven, while her mind raced through tactical options. She knew that her rescue ship was no match for 3 enemy fighters, but she also knew that running away would mean certain death for the stranded crew. The first raider ship opened fire with plasma cannons that lit up space with deadly green energy, and Kate threw her ship into evasive maneuvers. The plasma bolts seared past the Valkyrie 1 close enough that Kate could feel the heat through her ship's hull, and her hands gripped the controls. She returned fire with her defensive weapons and watched her laser beam streak toward the lead raider while she prayed for a lucky hit. The alien ship's shields flared as her weapons struck, but the energy barriers held and the raider continued its attack. Kate realized that this was going to be the most difficult fight of her life against opponents who had every advantage, except determination. The second raider moved to flank her, while the third positioned itself to cut off any escape route, and Kate felt the cold grip of tactical despair. Behind her, the New Haven continued venting atmosphere while Officer Danny Wright worked frantically in the reactor compartment to prevent a nuclear explosion. Captain Lisa Harper's voice crackled through the communication system, reporting that more crew members were ready for evacuation. Kate felt torn between her desire to continue the rescue operation and the immediate need to fight for everyone's survival. The lead raider fired again, and this time, the plasma bolt clipped the Valkyrie 1's port wing and sent sparks flying through the cockpit. Kate felt her ship shudder under the impact and saw warning lights begin flashing as systems reported damage to her navigation array. She pulled into a sharp turn that would have crushed a human pilot without proper equipment and lined up another shot at the enemy. Her laser cannons found their mark and punched through the raiders' shields to score hits on the alien ship's hull. The enemy vessel began trailing vapor from damaged systems, but continued attacking with weapons that seemed untouched by her fire. Kate realized that the raiders were built for combat while her ship was designed for rescue operations, and the difference might be fatal. The second raider opened fire from her flank, and Kate barely avoided the plasma bolts by diving toward a cluster of asteroids. She used the floating rocks as cover, while she tried to think of a strategy that might give her a chance against superior numbers. Wright's voice came through her headset, with an update on the reactor situation that made Kate's heart sink even further. The containment field was failing faster than expected, and Wright estimated that they now had less than 90 minutes before the explosion. Kate looked at her sensor display and saw that there were still 12 crew members aboard the New Haven who had not been evacuated. She was facing the same impossible choice that had haunted her for years since the training accident that earned her the call sign: dead weight. She could either continue fighting the raiders and probably die without saving anyone, or she could try to evacuate more crew and leave everyone vulnerable. The third raider moved to block her path back to the New Haven, and Kate realized that the aliens were coordinating their attack to trap her. She fired at the blocking ship and managed to damage its port engine, but the raider adjusted course to maintain its position. Kate felt sweat running down her face inside her helmet as she pushed her ship through maneuvers that tested the limits of human endurance. The lead raider came at her again with plasma cannons blazing, and this time Kate decided to do something that bordered on insanity. She flew directly at the enemy ship while firing all her weapons and playing a deadly game of chicken with an alien pilot. The raider tried to evade at the last second, but Kate anticipated the move and poured laser fire into the ship's exposed belly. Her weapons found something vital, and the alien vessel exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the asteroid field. Kate felt a moment of savage satisfaction before the second raider's plasma bolt slammed into her ship's rear section. The Valkyrie 1 spun out of control while alarms screamed, and Kate fought to regain stability as systems failed around her. Her communication array was destroyed, which meant she could no longer talk to Wright or Captain Harper or anyone else. Kate found herself flying deaf and partially blind while two enemy ships moved in for the kill. She managed to stabilize her ship but saw that her engines were running on emergency power and would fail within minutes. The remaining raiders seemed to sense her weakness and began closing in like predators moving in for the final strike. Kate looked at her weapons display and saw that she had enough power for one more sustained attack before her system shut down. She thought about the crew members still trapped aboard the New Haven and felt the familiar weight of impossible responsibility. Wright was still working to prevent the reactor explosion, but he needed time that Kate might not be able to give him. The rescued crew members were floating in life pods that would keep them alive for hours, but only if the raiders did not destroy them. Kate made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness, but she knew it was the only choice that made sense. She would use her remaining power to destroy one more raider ship, even if it meant sacrificing her own vessel. Kate turned toward the nearest enemy ship and pushed her, failing engines to maximum power while her weapons charged for one final attack. The alien raider seemed to recognize her intention and tried to evade. But Kate had committed everything to this moment. Her laser cannons fired in a sustained burst that drained her ship's power reserves and turned the enemy vessel into expanding debris. The third raider immediately fired at Kate's helpless ship, and she felt the plasma bolt tear through her hull like a burning sword. The Valkyrie 1 went dark as her main power failed, and Kate found herself drifting helpless while emergency life support kept her alive. She could see the final raider ship moving toward the New Haven and knew that she had failed to protect the stranded crew. Kate tried to restart her engines, but the damage was too extensive, and she watched helplessly as the enemy approached its targets. Through her damaged sensors, she could see that Officer Wright was still alive in the reactor compartment, but time was running out. Raider began attacking the New Haven with plasma fire, and Kate felt sick as she realized that all her efforts had been for nothing. But then something appeared on her sensors that made her heart leap with sudden hope. Multiple contacts were approaching, at high speed from the direction of Earth, and Kate recognized the energy signatures of human ships. Someone was coming to help, but Kate wondered if they would arrive in time to make a difference. Her ship was powerless and drifting, while the alien raider continued its attack on the defenseless cargo freighter. Kate felt the familiar cold weight of responsibility as she realized that she might have to watch people die because she had failed to save them. The approaching ships were still too far away to intervene, and Kate could only hope that Wright would succeed in preventing the reactor explosion. She thought about her call sign, deadweight, and wondered if this mission would end the same way as the training accident years ago. Kate closed her eyes and tried not to think about the families who would never see their loved ones again. if she had made the wrong choices. Major Alex Parker sat in the command center on Earth, watching his screens while the fate of Kate Morrison and 37 innocent people hung in the balance. He had been monitoring the situation through classified deep space communication arrays, while his F-22 squadron waited on standby. Parker knew about Kate's call sign Deadweight, and he also knew the real story behind the training accident that had nearly destroyed her career. Years ago, he had been part of the investigation team that reviewed every second of that tragic incident. Parker remembered sitting in the hearing room while they analyzed Kate's split-second decision to save hundreds of civilians instead of her wingman. The investigation had concluded that Kate made the only choice possible, but the other pilots never forgave her for letting their friend die. Parker had always believed that Kate Morrison was one of the finest pilots in the service, and that her call sign was completely unfair. Now he watched his sensors, showing Kate's ship drifting powerless, while an alien raider attacked the helpless cargo freighter. Parker made a decision that could end his military career, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He activated his communication system and broadcast on all emergency frequencies while breaking the radio silence that had been ordered by Earth Command. His transmission cut through space toward the distant asteroid field where Kate was fighting for her life and the lives of others. Parker spoke, the words that would change everything when he said, "Deadweight, this is Ghost Leader, and we are coming to help you." His F-22 squadron had been equipped with experimental faster-than-light communication systems that allowed them to coordinate with deep space operations. The technology was still being tested, but Parker knew that desperate times required desperate measures. He received emergency authorization from Earth Command to deploy his squadron using experimental spacefold technology that had never been used in combat. Parker felt his heart pounding as he realized that he was about to lead atmospheric fighters into deep space for the first time in military history. His squadron consisted of 12 F-22 Raptor fighters that had been modified with space-capable systems for exactly this kind of mission. The pilots were all volunteers who had trained for years to extend human military reach beyond Earth's atmosphere. Parker knew that the mission was incredibly dangerous because the spacefold technology was unreliable and might strand them in the void, but he also knew that Kate Morrison and the crew of the New Haven deserved every chance at survival that he could give them. The F-22s launched from their base and activated the experimental drive systems that would carry them across impossible distances. Parker felt the strange sensation of spacefold travel as reality seemed to twist around his fighter, and the stars became streaks of light. His instruments showed readings that made no sense as the experimental technology bent the laws of physics. The journey that should have taken months was completed in minutes, but Parker had no idea if all his pilots would survive the transition. When the spacefold effect ended, Parker found himself and his squadron floating in the asteroid field near the battle. He could see Kate's powerless ship drifting among the rocks while the alien raider continued attacking the New Haven. Parker realized that they had arrived just in time to make a difference, but the situation was still desperate. His F-22s were not designed for space combat, but they carried weapons that could damage enemy ships if used correctly. Parker coordinated his squadron's attack while wondering if their atmospheric fighters could survive in the vacuum of space. The alien raider detected the arrival of 12 human fighters and seemed confused by opponents it had never encountered before. Parker led his squadron in a coordinated attack that caught the enemy ship by surprise. The F-22s fired missiles and cannon rounds that overwhelmed the raider's defenses and turned it into expanding debris. But Parker's victory was short-lived when his sensors detected Kate's ship and realized that she was unconscious and dying. Her life support systems were failing, and Parker estimated that she had only minutes left before her oxygen ran out completely. He ordered his pilots to link their fighters together using emergency docking protocols that had never been attempted in combat. The F-22s formed a makeshift space station by connecting their life support systems and creating a pocket of survivable atmosphere. Parker personally flew close to Kate's ship and used his fighter's manipulator arms to extract her from the damaged cockpit. He brought her into the improvised life support bubble where military medics worked frantically to revive her. Kate's face was blue from oxygen deprivation, and Parker feared that they had arrived too late to save her. The medics used emergency resuscitation equipment while Parker monitored the situation aboard the New Haven, Officer Danny Wright was still alive in the reactor compartment, but the containment field was on the verge of complete failure. Parker realized that saving Kate would mean nothing if the cargo freighter exploded and killed everyone in the area. He contacted Wright directly and learned that the engineer needed someone to manually reroute power conduits from outside the ship. Parker made the decision to send some of his pilots on a dangerous EVA mission to help Wright prevent the reactor explosion. 3 F-22 pilots suited up for extravehicular activity and flew their fighters close to the New Haven's damaged hull. They used their ship's tools to access the power conduits that Wright needed to reroute. While working in the shadow of a failing nuclear reactor, Parker watched his pilots risk their lives to save strangers, while Kate slowly began to regain consciousness. Her eyes opened and Parker could see confusion and fear as she tried to understand what had happened. Kate tried to speak, but her throat was too damaged from oxygen deprivation, and Parker told her to rest while his pilots finished. The mission Wright's voice came through the communication system with growing excitement as he reported that the power rerouting was working. The reactor containment field began stabilizing, and Wright announced that the explosion had been prevented. Parker felt a surge of relief that was immediately replaced by concern for the remaining crew members aboard the New Haven. There were still people trapped in different sections of the cargo ship, and they needed to be evacuated before their air ran out. Kate tried to get up despite her injuries because she felt responsible for completing the rescue mission. Parker gently pushed her back down and told her that his squadron would finish what she had started. The F-22 pilots used their fighters to extract the remaining life pods from the New Haven while Wright worked to restore partial power. Parker coordinated the evacuation while keeping one eye on Kate, who was slowly recovering from her near-death experience. All 37 crew members of the New Haven were successfully rescued and transferred to the improvised life support station. Parker looked around at the collection of life pods and space fighters that had become humanity's most unlikely rescue fleet. Kate finally found her voice and asked Parker how he had known to come help her. Parker smiled and told her that he had recognized her call sign and knew that Deadweight was actually one of the best pilots in the service. He explained that he had been part of the investigation years ago and had always believed that she made the right choice. Kate felt tears in her eyes as she realized that someone finally understood the burden she had been carrying. Parker activated his long-range communicators and reported to Earth Command that the rescue mission was successful. All 37 crew members of the New Haven had been saved, and the alien raiders had been defeated. Parker knew that his decision to break radio silence would have consequences, but he also knew that it was worth it. Kate looked at the rescued crew members floating safely in their life pods and felt something she had not experienced in years. For the first time since the training accident, she felt like she had made choices that saved everyone instead of sacrificing some for others. Parker told her that she was a hero, but Kate shook her head and said that heroes were people who did not have to make impossible choices. Parker disagreed and told Kate that real heroes were people who made the hard choices and carried the weight so that others did not have to. Kate looked at the rescued crew members floating safely in their life pods and felt something she had not experienced since the training accident years ago. For the first time, she had saved everyone without having to sacrifice anyone, and the weight she had carried in her chest began to lift. But her moment of relief was shattered when Officer Danny Wright's voice crackled through the communication system with devastating news. The reactor stabilization was only temporary, and the containment field was beginning to fail again due to damage that could not be repaired from inside. Wright explained that someone would need to manually reroute the main power conduits from outside the ship while the reactor was still active. The task would require precise work in the vacuum of space next to a nuclear reactor that could explode at any moment. Kate knew immediately that she was the only person qualified to perform such dangerous work, because she had trained for exactly this kind of emergency. Major Alex Parker tried to stop her when he realized what she was planning, but Kate pushed past him toward her damaged ship. The Valkyrie 1 was barely functional, but its maneuvering thrusters still worked, and that was all Kate needed. For what she had to do, Parker grabbed her arm and told her that she was too injured to attempt such a dangerous mission. Kate looked into his eyes and saw the same expression she remembered from the investigation officers years ago. They all wanted to protect her from making the hard choices, but Kate knew that someone had to carry the weight. She climbed into her damaged cockpit while Parker argued that one of his F-22 pilots could attempt the repair mission. Kate started her ship's emergency systems and felt the familiar hum of machinery that had saved so many lives. She told Parker that his pilots were brave, but they lacked the specialized training needed for reactor maintenance. Workwright's voice interrupted their argument with an update that made everyone's blood run cold. The containment field would fail completely within 30 minutes, and when it did, the explosion would vaporize everything within 15,000 kilometers. Kate felt the familiar cold determination settle over her as she realized that this was another moment when everything depended on her choices. She launched the Valkyrie 1 from the makeshift life support station, while Parker continued trying to convince her to let someone else take the risk. Kate maneuvered her damaged ship toward the new haven, while her instruments showed radiation levels that were already dangerous. She could see the power conduits that Wright needed her to access, but they were located in the most damaged section of the cargo ship. Kate suited up for EVA while her ship's computer warned her about the radiation exposure she was about to receive. She knew that working next to an unstable reactor would probably give her radiation poisoning that could be fatal. But Kate also knew that if she did not attempt the repairs, then everyone would die when the reactor exploded. She attached her safety line and opened the airlock while trying not to think about the invisible radiation streaming from the damaged reactor. Kate floated in the vacuum of space while debris from the new haven drifted around her like a metallic snowstorm. She could see the power conduits that Wright needed her to reroute, but reaching them would require her to work directly above the reactor. Housing Kate began the delicate process of disconnecting and reconnecting the power systems, while Wright guided her through each step. Her radiation detector began clicking faster as she moved closer to the reactor, and Kate tried to ignore the sound. Parker's voice came through her headset asking for regular status updates, and Kate could hear the worry in his tone. She worked as quickly as possible, while being careful not to make any mistakes that could trigger an immediate explosion. The power conduits were heavier than she expected, and Kate had to use all her strength to maneuver them into their new positions. Wright reported that the first conduit connection was successful, and that the containment field was beginning to stabilize. Kate felt a moment of hope before she realized that there were still 3 more conduits that needed to be rerouted. Her radiation detector was clicking so fast that it sounded like an angry insect, and Kate knew she was receiving dangerous levels of exposure. Parker begged her to return to safety and let someone else finish the work, but Kate knew there was no time to train another person. She continued working while her hands began to shake from radiation sickness and exhaustion. The second conduit was more difficult because it had been damaged by shrapnel from the original explosion. Kate had to cut away twisted metal, while being careful not to damage the delicate power systems. Wright's voice became increasingly excited as he reported that the reactor was responding to her repairs. The containment field strength was increasing, and the immediate danger of explosion was decreasing. With each connection she made, Kate finished the third conduit and moved toward the final connection that would complete the repair, but her radiation detector was now clicking so fast that she could barely hear Wright's instructions. Kate felt nauseous and dizzy from radiation exposure, but she forced herself to concentrate on the delicate work. The final conduit was located in the most dangerous position directly above the reactor core. Kate had to float directly over the source of radiation while making the connection that would save everyone. Her hands were shaking badly now, and she had to make several attempts before she could grasp the heavy conduit. Wright's voice guided her through the final steps while Kate fought to stay conscious. She made the last connection, and Wright immediately reported that the reactor was stabilizing. The containment field was now strong enough to hold, and the danger of explosion had passed. Kate felt a surge of relief that was immediately followed by the realization that she might have received a fatal dose of radiation. She tried to return to her ship, but her legs would not support her weight, and she began drifting helplessly in space. Parker's voice was shouting through her headset, but Kate could barely understand his words. Her vision was blurring, and she felt like she was falling, even though she was floating in zero gravity. Kate looked at the new haven and saw that all the crew members were safe, and that Wright had prevented the reactor explosion. She had finally completed a mission without having to sacrifice anyone, and she felt peaceful despite her condition. Parker's F-22 flew close to her position, and Kate could see him trying to reach her with his ship's manipulator arms. She wanted to tell him that it was worth it and that she would make the same choice again if she had to. Kate thought about her call sign deadweight and realized that she had finally proven that she could carry any burden. The weight of impossible choices no longer felt like a punishment, but like a responsibility that she was proud to bear. Her consciousness began to fade. But Kate could hear Parker's voice telling her that she was a hero. She wanted to tell him that heroes were just people who were willing to carry the weight that others could not bear. Kate closed her eyes and felt herself drifting in the peaceful darkness while radiation slowly destroyed her body. But she also felt something she had never experienced before, which was the knowledge that she had saved everyone. No one had been sacrificed, and no impossible choice had been required because she had found a way to carry all the weight herself. Kate Morrison floated unconscious in space, while Major Alex Parker fought desperately to save the woman who had saved everyone else. Major Alex Parker refused to accept that Kate Morrison was going to die after everything she had sacrificed to save the crew of the New Haven. He maneuvered his F-22 fighter close to Kate's drifting body, while his mind raced through options that seemed impossible. Kate was unconscious and her radiation detector showed exposure levels that should have been fatal, but Parker would not give up. He activated his emergency medical systems and began coordinating with the other F-22 pilots to attempt something that had never been tried before. Parker ordered his squadron to link their fighters together in a configuration that would pool their life support and medical resources. The F-22s were never designed to operate as a space hospital, but human ingenuity had always found ways to exceed design limitations. Parker's pilots used their emergency docking systems to create a chain of connected fighters that shared atmosphere and power. Each F-22 contributed its medical supplies and life support capacity to create a makeshift treatment facility in the void of space. Parker personally retrieved Kate's unconscious body and brought her into the pressurized environment they had created. The military medics aboard the fighters worked frantically to treat radiation poisoning using techniques they had never attempted in space. Kate's vital signs were weak and irregular, but the medics detected brain activity that suggested she might still be saved. Parker coordinated the medical effort while monitoring the status of the rescued crew members. From the New Haven officer Danny Wright reported that the reactor repairs were holding and that there was no longer any danger of explosion. All 37 crew members were safe in their life pods and would survive until rescue ships could arrive from Earth. But Kate's condition was deteriorating rapidly, despite everything the medics were doing to help her. Parker made a desperate decision to attempt an experimental treatment that had only been tested in laboratory conditions. He ordered his pilots to reconfigure their linked fighters to create an improvised radiation treatment chamber. The F-22s used their navigation sensors and communication arrays to generate focused energy fields that might counteract the radiation damage. Parker knew that the procedure was incredibly dangerous and might kill Kate instead of saving her. But he also knew that doing nothing would certainly result in her death from radiation poisoning. The pilots worked together to calibrate their systems while Kate's life hung in the balance. Parker held Kate's hand while the experimental treatment began, and he could feel how cold her skin had become. The energy fields generated by the linked F-22s created a strange blue glow around Kate's body. Parker watched the medical monitors showing her vital signs and prayed that their desperate gamble would work. For several minutes, nothing seemed to change, and Parker feared that they had arrived too late to make a difference. Then Kate's heartbeat began to strengthen and her breathing became more regular. The medics reported that her radiation levels were decreasing and that her body was beginning to recover. Parker felt tears of relief running down his face as he realized that their impossible plan was actually working. Kate's eyes opened slowly and she looked around in confusion at the chain of F-22 fighters that had become her hospital. Parker explained what had happened and how his squadron had linked together to save her life. Kate tried to speak, but her voice was weak and hoarse from the radiation exposure. She asked about the crew of the New Haven, and Parker told her that all 37 people had been rescued successfully. Kate closed her eyes and Parker could see relief wash over her face as she realized that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Wright's voice came through the communication system to report that the reactor was now completely stable. The New Haven was badly damaged, but no longer in danger of exploding, and the crew could be safely evacuated. Parker contacted Earth Command to request immediate dispatch of hospital ships and heavy rescue vessels. He knew that Kate needed advanced medical treatment that could only be provided at a proper medical facility. The response from Earth Command surprised Parker because they already had ships en route to their position. Admiral Susan Hayes had been monitoring the situation and had dispatched a full rescue fleet when Parker first broke radio silence. Parker realized that his decision to violate orders had actually been anticipated and approved by higher command. Admiral Hayes appeared on the communication screen and congratulated Parker on his squadron's successful mission. She explained that Earth Command had been looking for an excuse to test the F-22 space modification. Program Parker's unauthorized deployment had provided the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that atmospheric fighters could operate in deep space. The Admiral also revealed that Kate Morrison had been selected for promotion to commander before the rescue mission began. Her heroic actions during the New Haven incident had simply confirmed what her superiors already knew about her abilities. Parker looked at Kate, who was slowly regaining her strength, and told her that she was going to receive a commendation. Kate shook her head weakly and said that she did not deserve recognition for doing what anyone would have done. Parker disagreed and explained that most people would not have been willing to sacrifice themselves to save strangers. The rescue fleet arrived within hours, and Kate was transferred to a hospital ship for advanced medical treatment. The crew of the New Haven was also evacuated and received medical care for their injuries. Parker's F-22 squadron was officially commended for their unprecedented space rescue operation, but Parker knew that the real hero was Kate Morrison, who had been willing to carry any burden to save innocent lives. The doctors reported that Kate would make a full recovery from her radiation exposure, thanks to the experimental treatment. Parker visited her in the hospital and found her reading reports about the rescued crew members. She told Parker that she was glad everyone had survived, but she still felt guilty about the choices she had been forced to make. Parker reminded Kate that heroes were not people who never faced difficult decisions. Real heroes were people who made the hard choices and carried the weight so that others would not have to. Kate looked out the hospital window at the stars and said that she finally understood what her call sign really meant. Dead weight was not about being a burden, but about being willing to carry burdens that others could not bear. Parker agreed and told Kate that the entire galaxy was safer because people like her were willing to make sacrifices. Kate smiled for the first time in years and said that maybe being called deadweight was actually an honor. She had learned that the heaviest weights were the ones that protected the people you cared about. Parker left the hospital, knowing that Kate Morrison had finally found peace with the choices that had defined her career. The woman who had been branded as deadweight had proven that she was actually humanity's guardian angel. Captain Frank Rodriguez stood before the assembled crew of the USS Defiance, with a mixture of pride and amazement in his weathered face. Kate Morrison sat in the front row, still recovering from her radiation exposure, but looking stronger than she had in years. Major Alex Parker stood beside the podium wearing his dress uniform and the medal he had received for his squadron's unprecedented space rescue operation. Rodriguez cleared his throat and began speaking about courage and sacrifice while Kate tried not to feel uncomfortable with the attention. The captain explained that the crew deserved to know the truth about their colleague and the call sign that had followed her for years. Parker stepped forward and told the story that Kate had never been able to tell herself years ago during a training exercise. Kate had been flying patrol with her wingman, Lieutenant Carl Brooks, near a civilian shipping lane. Their routine mission had turned into a nightmare when a massive passenger transport lost control and began tumbling toward a space station. Kate had been forced to choose between saving her wingman, whose fighter was damaged, or preventing a collision that would kill hundreds of civilians. Parker explained that Kate had less than 30 seconds to make a decision that would determine who lived and who died. She chose to use her ship to deflect the transport away from the space station while Brooks tried to reach safety in his damaged fighter. The passenger transport was saved, and 300 civilian lives were preserved, but Brooks died when his fighter exploded. The other pilots in Kate's squadron blamed her for letting their friend die and started calling her deadweight. They believed that she had frozen under pressure and failed to act quickly enough to save Brooks. But the investigation had revealed the truth, which was that Kate made the only choice that could save the maximum number of lives. Parker told the crew that Kate had carried the guilt and the unfair reputation for years without defending herself. She had accepted the burden of being blamed for Brooks's death because she understood that someone had to make the hard choices. Rodriguez nodded and added that Kate's actions during the New Haven rescue had demonstrated the same selfless decision-making. She had been willing to sacrifice herself to save 37 strangers, just as she had sacrificed her reputation to save 300 civilians. Kate stood up slowly and faced her colleagues. While trying to find words that could explain years of carrying impossible weight, she told them that being called deadweight had taught her that leadership meant being willing to bear burdens that others could not carry. The name had hurt her for a long time, but she had eventually learned to see it as a reminder of her responsibility. Kate explained that heroes were not people who never faced difficult choices, but people who made the right choices, regardless of personal cost. Rodriguez officially announced that Kate was being promoted to commander and would receive the Distinguished Service Cross. He also revealed that Earth Command was creating a new Deep Space Rescue Division with Kate as its commanding officer. Parker added that his F-22 squadron had been permanently assigned to provide space-based support for rescue operations. The combination of atmospheric fighters and deep space rescue ships had proven incredibly effective during the New Haven incident. Kate was offered the opportunity to choose a new call sign to replace deadweight, but she surprised everyone by declining. She explained that deadweight had become part of who she was, and that changing it would feel like abandoning her identity. The name reminded her daily that someone had to be willing to carry the heaviest burdens and make the hardest choices. Rodriguez asked if she was certain about keeping a call sign that had caused her so much pain. Kate looked around at her colleagues and saw respect in their eyes instead of the judgment she had grown accustomed to. She told them that deadweight was no longer a mark of shame, but a badge of honor that represented her willingness to sacrifice for others. Parker suggested that perhaps the meaning of her call sign had evolved just as Kate herself had evolved. What once represented a burden had become a symbol of strength and dedication to saving lives. Kate agreed and said that she had learned to carry weight, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to handle it. The ceremony concluded with Kate receiving her promotion and her new assignment as head of the Deep Space Rescue Corps Admiral. Susan Hayes appeared via video link to congratulate Kate and to announce that the New Haven incident had changed military policy. Earth Command was expanding its deep space capabilities and investing in new technologies that would prevent similar disasters. The alien raiders that had attacked the New Haven were revealed to be scouts from a larger, hostile force. Kate's successful defense had prevented them from capturing advanced human technology and had delayed a potential invasion. Admiral Hayes explained that Kate's actions had given humanity valuable time to prepare for future threats. Rescued crew members of the New Haven sent personal messages thanking Kate for her sacrifice. Officer Danny Wright had nominated Kate for the highest civilian honor for her work, preventing the reactor explosion. Captain Lisa Harper wrote that Kate Morrison represented the best qualities of humanity in the face of impossible odds. Kate read the messages in her quarters later that night and felt something she had not experienced since the training accident. For the first time in years, she felt proud of the choices she had made instead of guilty about their consequences. Parker visited her before returning to Earth and found Kate studying star charts for future rescue missions. He told her that the galaxy was a safer place because she was willing to make the sacrifices that others could not make. Kate looked out at the stars and said that she finally understood why humans were successful in space. They succeeded not because they were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they were willing to carry each other's burdens. Human ingenuity came from the willingness to sacrifice for strangers and to find solutions that saved everyone. Parker agreed and said that Kate embodied the best of human nature, which was the refusal to abandon anyone. Kate's call sign, deadweight, had become a symbol of humanity's greatest strength, which was their capacity for selfless action. She had learned that the heaviest weights were not punishments, but privileges that came with the responsibility to protect others. Kate Morrison would continue carrying those weights because someone had to, and she was strong enough to bear them. The woman who had been branded as deadweight had become humanity's guardian, and she wore that burden with pride years. Later, when new recruits asked about Commander Morrison's unusual call sign, they were told the story of impossible choices. They learned that heroes were not people who faced easy decisions, but people who made hard choices and carried the consequences. Kate's story became a legend in the Deep Space Rescue Corps and inspired countless others to accept difficult responsibilities. The call sign deadweight was no longer an insult, but a title of honor that represented the highest ideals of human service. Kate Morrison had proven that sometimes the greatest strength came from being willing to carry weights that would crush others. She had transformed a mark of shame into a symbol of heroism, and had shown that humans would never abandon each other. The rescue of the New Haven became a defining moment that demonstrated humanity's refusal to accept impossible choices. They had found a way to save everyone because Kate Morrison was willing to carry whatever weight was necessary. Her call sign would forever remind future generations that true heroes were those who bore the burdens that others could not carry. And in the vast darkness of space, Kate Morrison continued her mission of bringing lost souls home.